go straight to an example of what open means in a community setting. How do you deploy this platform of open technology in a way that changes the lives of people that operate in our community sector? Remembering that people who work in the community sector earn very little money relative to a lot of other professions in this country. They usually, as individuals, commit their lives and their time to the benefit and well-being of others. And quite often they're at the bottom of the pile when it comes to technological innovation and opportunities as organisations to actually make a difference. They do it tough. Anyway, Darrell has been inspiring right from the word go with his computing assistance support and education project case in supporting community organisations. I ought to declare that I am very proud to be patron of this organisation and have worked with Darrell for many years and heard about his development. And I thought this was a perfect opportunity to present the case for case, if you like, and the impact that open technology has in the community sector. So Darrell, I'm hoping you're just about there, and if not, I can tell them more about you. He holds degrees in professional photography and information technology. He was a staff IT trainer for the University of Canberra and currently a Unix systems administrator at this university, the ANU. He was awarded the Vice Chancellor's Staff Award for Community Involvement for his, I should stress, volunteer work with CADE. And he's contributed to research on issues relating to the equitable access to technology in Australia. A great champion of closure of the digital divide. And he's a member of SAGE, Systems Administrators Guild of Australia. So please welcome Darrell, and he has information up. Great.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I didn't bring my trendy little remote control, so does anyone have a broomstick? Because I may have to rely on some older technology here. Does it work?
Yeah, I'm just not sure which button it is.
The red button. The red button, you sure? Like that one?
That one. Hold it down.
Oh, okay. We'll see if that works. We'll be surprised. Okay. Anyway, I am Darrell Burkey. I'm the president of Computing Assistant Support and Education, in case you haven't guessed. I actually do wear two hats. In the daytime, I'm kind of a meek Unix administrator here at the ANU, as Kate has said, hiding in the basement of the Coombs building, for those of you who may know the Coombs building, designed by M.S. Escher, I think. But at nighttime, and sometimes out of business hours, I am the defender of free and open source software. Now, for those of you who are about to say Red Hat has gone commercial, I bought the hat before they went commercial. Okay? Okay? All right. Now, I would like to talk to you about two things today. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Sometimes I think the community sector doesn't quite get, enough word out there, especially in venues like this. But if you stop and think about it, the ideas that we come up with today and the things that we're going to feed to the summit really won't do any good unless we have venues and conduits for those ideas to be actioned. CASE is one of those conduits. It's been going for about 10 years, and I'd like to spend a little time explaining it to you. Oddly enough, it started with you speaking at a coffee house in Kingston 10 years ago. So I've sort of come full circle by coming here today. The second thing I'd like to talk to you about is I'd like to show you two examples of the work that we have done. Because not only do you need a conduit and a venue, but at the end of the day, where does this all go? And from my point of view, it all goes to people. And that's pretty cool. Some of the things we've done with open source have had a significant effect on people's lives, and on people who, in many cases, are very excluded in our society. So we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without the open technology that we're speaking about today. So what I'd like to do today is introduce to you a little bit about CASE, share some information about things that you may not have thought about, sometimes we do think about, but some of the things CASE deals with and the community development sector deal with are very scary and frightening. So sometimes we don't talk about them. I'm going to discuss a few ideas with you. As I said, I have 2 projects I'd like to share with you which demonstrate outcomes, which I think are very important, because at the end of the day, that's what I would like from today, is to see some outcomes. And knowing the 2 people who are running this, I think they will as well. And I'd also like to answer some questions, because sometimes what we do is a little bit challenging and different than the way other people are approaching things. So you may have some questions about why we do it that way. And if there's any devil's advocates in here, please speak up, okay? Because I'm a big believer that you don't have things right if you can't answer the questions of devil advocates. So what is it that we do? People are always asking me, what is CASE? What do you do? Well, basically, we broker volunteer skills with community needs. So basically, we'll take people, and I'm going to use Tridge as an example. You know, he wants to do something for the community. He may volunteer his time as a one-off, helping somebody with something. And indeed, that's what the people who founded CASE were doing. We were all donating our time on various projects, but what we identified is that when we left those projects, nothing happened. And indeed, sometimes when you leave those projects, bad things happen, because there's nobody there to continue with it. I can't tell you how many websites and domain names CASE has rescued over the years because a volunteer student, you know, out of the goodness of their heart, and the group definitely needed that work, volunteered their time, but then they told nobody the passwords and went off to Jamaica, you know. I talked a lot about being a conduit, and that really is the basic role of CASE, is we are providing a venue and a foundation for people who have the skills needed by the community development sector to do initiatives that will build social capital. And it does build social capital in a major way. I think you'll be quite surprised at how little you can put in and how much you can get out. And that's one of the really exciting things about venues like CASE, is the return on investment. Very, very high. If you want to volunteer your time and you want to make a difference, an organization like CASE is what you need to look for. I'm not actually here to sell CASE as much as I was asked to. I'm a little embarrassed about selling CASE, because I'm one of those type of people who believes in proving things. And so for 10 years, we've been out there proving things. And that's why you haven't heard about us. We've had our head down, bums up, and we've been doing work. It's pretty cool work, and we now have a big body of really exciting things. Also, we provide continuity and accountability, and that's what I was just talking to you about. It's great that students want to work on things. It's great that you guys want to work on things. But the community sector has specific needs. So you need somebody there so that when you leave and the next person comes in, the documentation is there. I'm looking at Jeff because Jeff would know that real IT people don't document. Oh, we should, but we don't. We don't. You know, it's not fun. It's not fun like the rest of it. So I like to tell people, you know, because people think CASE is an IT organization because we're providing IT support to the community sector. So that makes sense that you would think that we're an IT organization. We aren't. I mean, we are in one respect, but I'm very, very adamant at describing to people that CASE is a community development initiative. Okay, the people came together to form CASE, wanted to leverage their skills, wanted to make sure that what we do really counts. Okay, we got tired of just helping one organization for, you know, a little while, and then the next one, and then seeing what we did fall apart. We came together and said there must be a better way. And after an 11-month talk fest, which kicked off with Kate, actually, we came up with this structure called CASE. So basically, we exist to assist individuals and community organizations in making better use of information technology to accomplish their goals. That's the important aspect in that sentence, is their goals, not our goals. What we're doing here is enhancing the capabilities of service delivery organizations to spend less time hassling with their IT and more time helping the homeless, helping kids who are contemplating terrible things, and basically helping to build the community. And it works. It works tremendously. I can't tell you the messes that we walked into and cleaned up. We just finished one for an actual peak body. They're just firing on all cylinders now. And I'm so excited about it because I've known the group for many years, and I now know that instead of sending out 10,000 virus-infected emails every couple minutes, which is what was happening, they're now concentrating on delivering their services. So the 2 groups I'd like to talk about today, and they're pretty cool. I'm really excited about this, and I feel very privileged to be involved with these people. Indeed, I get the privilege of being involved with about 30 groups. I'd like to see it be more like 30,000 because our model does scale, and it scales very well. We can have no funding and do fantastic things. We can have a lot of funding and do really fantastic things. So CASE is always going to be there because we're not dependent on any funding. Okay? We operate on cost recovery. So when we do projects for our members, they pay us. So essentially we're getting funded through their funding, which is your tax money. Okay? And I'm sure that you would like to see your tax money go to CASE. You may also send your money directly to me if you'd like. We have no objections to that at all. The first group I'm going to talk about is called Volunteers for Isolated Students Education. Now, I brought this up because this is probably the best example of return on investment I've ever seen. Right now, this group is operating on about $40,000 a year. They're delivering between $4 and $8 million worth of services in Queensland and Northern Territory. How's that for a return, huh? Can you mention many commercial organizations that can do that? And one of the ways they're doing that now is through what Jeff so aptly described to you, which is LAMP. How boring, huh? This technology, this Apache server somewhere off in Philadelphia is actually helping these people do that tremendous return on investment that I just told you about. So let's have a look about them. The other one I'm going to talk about a little bit later, and I'll do these very quickly because I really don't know how much you want to know about these. And the only point I'm bringing them up is as examples of what the work we're doing today, if we send off to a venue, can get out. Okay? Because I do think it's important to prove these things, not just to talk about them. And here's proof. The National Women's Justice Coalition started an online service called the Australian Virtual Centre for Women in the Law. While I was researching it today, I happened to notice that it was launched, believe it or not, by Kate Lundy in 1999. I know, just this young, innocent person ages ago, right? I mean, in internet years, what is that, 9 times 7? I can't do that. That's a long time ago, okay? They were using modems. I was going to bring a modem today, but I just couldn't stand the thought of touching it. Okay. So what is VISE and the project that we did for them, the Online Volunteer Management System? Well, basically, it's a system that sends hundreds of volunteer tutors to the Outback. Now, I'm very happy that we're in an academic environment because what these people do is take retired teachers, and apparently retired teachers just never stop teaching. I mean, I think you can go to their funerals, and if you look in the casket, there's flashcards or something. They just never stop. They're a fantastic resource. So what this group did was take these people and say, hey, while you're traveling around Australia, you know, just in your little caravans and stuff, how about stopping by these stations that have these kids on them, working at the school, through the School of Air, and helping them out? Because some of them are having troubles with their math or their remedial reading or whatever, and you happen to be an expert in that. These people said, yeah, that's cool, we'll do that. So they were trucking along, doing okay, but they ended up spending $10,000 a year sending faxes to each other. And I went to a station once, came back and sort of looked at what they were doing, said, you know, you had a tutor there in Queensland, and 2 weeks later there was a station next door, and of course in Australia that means, you know, 500 kilometers, and they needed somebody the next week, but your tutor went back to Victoria. How come? And they said, well, we have different coordinators for the states, and they didn't know that that person was tutoring in that other state. And I said, well, have I got a deal for you? And off came the Online Volunteer Management System, which now has been going for 8 years. So you have to remember that in the context of 8 years ago, things were considerably different. So what did we do? We created a centralized database. We put it on the web so everybody could get to it. What a novel idea. And you know what? We used open source software. Now, I suppose I could say I used open source software because I think it's cool, I know it's effective, it's high quality, all the things we're talking about today. But the fact of the matter is that's all that was there. Okay? There weren't many web servers that were running anything but Apache, and I didn't really care what they were running in our service, you know? I just wanted to give these kids some help. We also needed it to be secure, private, and reliable. If that doesn't describe open source software, I don't know what doesn't. So we created it for the reasons I told you. Plus, it saved them a lot of money. It improved their reporting and accountability. I'm going to run a report at the end of this talk, not because I'm particularly interested in the report, but because it's going to show you something very cool. It enabled decentralized processing. They've got people all over the country. You know, they're placement officers in Melbourne. You know, the tutors are wherever, out back of Burke. So basically, you know, people had to be able to get to this. And it enforced business rules. This is very important because as time went by, people started implementing some pretty heavy-duty requirements, insurance requirements. They now have a thing called the Blue Card in Queensland where you can't work with children unless you know, have gone through all this. Very important things. But of course, somebody has to keep track of, you know, does this person have their Blue Card, you know? And it became even more important because Vice's insurance company said, if you're not following this, these people are not going to be covered when they go out there. And if you've ever been to a station, it's very important to have insurance. And of course, we wanted to simplify complex tasks. All of this, you know, is, for people in this room, is no big deal. So we used a simple web interface, worked well on modems. It's based on the relationships between the people. And it addresses the needs of 3 discrete groups in their organization. I should say that, and this is an example of how CASE brings people together, the schema, the data schema for this system was designed by an Oracle database engineer from the Department of Veteran Affairs. Those are the kind of people that we bring together. If he hadn't have done that schema, this thing just would have fallen apart, because it is pretty sophisticated. I just put this up there because I like it, you know? Sort of like, I have to give a talk on this later at one of their conventions that's coming up here in Canberra, actually, next week. And I just wanted to point out to them that, you know, basically what this thing does is just take a whole bunch of information from different sources of people and then spit it back out, okay? Its main role is to act as an aid to the local placement people who know the families that need help. And the volunteers have plugged all their information in, their qualifications, where they're going to be, when they're going to be there, that type of thing. And the system spits out a best guess of a list of tutors that you might want to call to help that family. Okay? It doesn't actually assign people. We don't want it doing that, because this is about people. We don't want a computer dictating what we do. But it does make recommendations and keep track of all the paperwork and stuff. So that's been pretty cool. VISE, like many other organizations, this talk isn't about the OVMS, of course, does lots of things on the web, just as everybody does here. And now this is becoming more and more important to the community sector, okay? Because they don't have many bucks, so they got to get the biggest bang for buck. The second thing I'm going to talk about is mailing lists. That may seem pretty blasé to you. We all use mailing lists. You may think, what's the big deal with mailing lists? Except for some people like Roger, who knows what the big deal is. They have their mailing list. But the big one is called the Australian Virtual Centre for Women and the Law. Now, it's interesting what we got involved in with this, and I'm switching topics here in case I haven't mentioned that. Remember, 9 years ago, a mailing list was not exactly a simple thing to use, especially if you had never seen one. You're working off a modem, so you're having enough trouble just getting your ISP to connect you to the internet, let alone using this software. These people had a pretty serious need where they needed legal advice. They were pretty serious matters, and they were spread all over the country. So they went out and they built a mailing list, and they called it the ABCWL. Now, we actually didn't build this for them. It was a major domo project. They had it written, custom written by a commercial organization in Sydney called Social Change Online. And it did wonderful things, all written in Perl, for those of you who like Perl. And it basically put a front end on Major Domo, which had never been there before, that allowed normal people to create mailing lists and to manage them. And it just took off. There's tens of thousands of women using this right now. Now, we weren't involved in that, so I can't take any credit. What we were involved in was 6 years later, when the New South Wales Law Foundation decided to decommission the Sun server that it was running on, said, I'm sorry, you're using so much bandwidth, you don't have the resources, we can't host it anymore. Ta-da! In comes free and open source software. So we said, look, we'll whack it on a Linux box for you. But we'll do it in exchange for the fact that you have a few resources, and we need a server room so that we can provide more services to our members. So here's another win-win example of what you can do when you have a venue like CASE. We had these people who needed their server moved. We had Case, who needed to provide more services locally because we're using the server in Philadelphia. And we had all these women who needed this service. Well, my first idea was I'll just buy another one of these Sun servers off eBay, which I did, and I'll bring it down here and I'll just clone everything from Sydney. Well, this is a good example of always having a plan B, because that server fell off of a forklift.
Really?
It did. This is a true story. And I must also admit that oops was not the word. Oops was not the word that I used. Okay, my word started with an F, and I said it several times. But I had a plan B, and that plan B. By the way, we only had $6 grand to do this. That plan B was that we were going to move it onto a Linux server anyway. Okay? So these people bought us some Dell servers, a rack, UPS, power, air conditioning. We whacked the Dell server in. We spent a couple months debugging the Perl because it hadn't been upgraded in 5 years, so it was totally insecure and wouldn't run. You know, I cranked it up, it rolled over, stuck up its little legs, and said, forget it. I said, oh, great, so I got to spend the next 4 weeks dealing with that. But we did it. And we had people, Tridge wasn't involved in that, but we had people like Tridge help us. So we did it. It went live a couple years ago. We've confirmed that it's working fantastically, even as we speak right now. This is the coolest part of it. The users didn't know. I gave a talk one day about it. Actually, you were there. I gave a talk about this one day, and a woman in the audience said, you moved the ABWCL? When did you do that? And I just said, oh, thank you. Where do I send the check? I couldn't have paid someone in an audience to say a nicer thing. What a performance indicator. They didn't know it moved. It's great. So they have a reliable service now. It's totally up to date. Continues to provide valuable assistance to thousands of people. Okay? And this isn't like light, chatty stuff. Okay? These are women dealing with domestic violence and some pretty serious legal issues. So I'm very, very proud that we're involved in it. Now, and here's the cool part. Because it's a win-win-win, we can now provide other services. Because we bought 4 other servers and stuck them in the rack as well. And one of those is going to be some pretty cool things like Joomla. Okay, we have a lot of users who would like to do content management systems. So we are now hosting Joomla sites. We're waiting for the new Joomla to come out, which came out about, 4 weeks ago or so. And we're betting that in, and we're going to offer that. And we're going to take away all the mystique and everything, just set it up for them, and they can go out and develop the content, which is how it should be. Okay? These people don't have webmasters. They don't have $80,000. The other thing that we're going to do, and we've spun off, and thanks to the kindness of the Australian Domain Association, who started a foundation to fund open, do they have to be open source? We'll have to check on that, Jeff. I don't know. Anyway, AUTA is now funding social online projects with money that they made from their geographical name release. Okay, because embarrassingly enough, they made millions of dollars. Being a nonprofit, that kind of panics you, like, what are we going to do with this money? So they formed the AUTA Foundation, and we were one of the benefactors of that. So we're now going to do a lovely service, which was launched 2 weeks ago, or this week, called Community Lists. Sorry, I almost forgot the name of the project. So Community Lists is an email mailing list service for the use of Australian nonprofit community organizations. It's free, and I like to think of it as the ABWCL Mach 2, okay? Because I'm pretty proud that it has that heritage. What made it possible was the ABCWL, and that's a very good example of how people working together can make some incredible things happen. Little plug for AUTA there. They have been fantastic to work with, AUTA. So basically, what I wanted to say to you today is that being open really does work. Okay, I've described to you an organization that has based itself around open technology and the amazing things that we've gotten done for society and for building social capital in our community. I could go on for days, as many of you have heard me speak before know. With Americans, there's a pretty good on switch, but the off switch is a little bit difficult to locate. It's pretty exciting work. People ask me why I do it. And I actually have a good example, but I won't pull it out. How are we doing for time?
Oh, we're pretty strapped.
We're pretty strapped, okay. Basically, the reason I do it is this one, opportunities for personal development. I can't tell you how much I've gotten out of this. Okay, people keep saying, oh, it's so wonderful that you do this. well, it isn't wonderful. I'd do it anyway. I get lots out of it. It's, you know, in some cases, you know, maybe that's not the right reason. But, you know, I opened up the paper 2 days ago, and on this page is an article about Canberra having 4 of the richest suburbs in, well, they didn't use the word richest, but, you know, well-off suburbs in the nation. And on this page is an article of an elderly lady who's a pensioner who can't afford food. Okay? People talk about it as digital divides. It's not a digital divide, it's a social divide. Okay? And we do have ways of taking care of that. And one of the things that we can do are what we're doing right now, right here, feeding ideas to the 2020 summit that will end up providing direct assistance to those in our community who are living with disadvantage. And according to an ANU study done just last week, that's 1 in 8 Australians. It's a lot of people, okay? And believe me, they're not just all taking advantage of the dole. We're talking about people with mental illness. We're talking about people who have been living with disadvantage for maybe second generation. They can't participate as much as they'd like to. So there needs to be a place in our society for these people. They're wonderful people. When was the last time you stopped and talked to the person selling the big issue? Do it. It's really cool. They've got cool backgrounds and cool lives. Okay. Do we have time for questions? Great questions. Make them good. Tough ones. Yes, sir.
The question in the comment. Here with Robert Starling of the CEBA, but I also work at the Geospatial Consortium, and my day job's in Aboriginal community.
Yes.
So really what you've been doing there is what we're now introducing. So getting these web-based centralized systems out into the communities to get government data fed back in, get a return on that, but then to get their input. And I think the critical bit in this 2020 space is, as was mentioned over here, is getting the feedback, getting that return going. I think for the last 10 years, we've all felt that we haven't been being listened to, we haven't had the opportunity to be listened to, and I'd just like to comment that I think this is a great way to start seeing some of these loops close again, which I think most feel have been.
One of the nice things about open technology is the equity issue. Okay, the little guy has as much say as Woolies. Okay, it's many people talking, whereas all our other types of communication are one-to-many or many-to-one. When you get the web going, you've got many-to-many, and some amazing things can happen because of that. Wait, just gotta say that. Okay, there you go. I just wanted to say thank you. Now we can have the second question. Okay, now you can have it.
I've been told to set up quickly.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Any other questions? Okay.
How many of your users know or care?
Most of them, and the feedback I get from them is they care a great deal. Okay, and the reason for that is because of the ethics involved in open technology match their ethics very, very well.
Sorry, you're talking about your direct users of the organizations rather than the individuals that they serve.
I'm sorry, you're asking about my members or the end users? I don't think the end users know, okay, because they're just interested in the service. But our members, the organizations, they know and they care a great deal. And we provided a lot of education on that. And they now realize, and I'll give you a very, very quick example, because I know we're stressed for time, and I'm not here to bash closed systems. As you can see, I even used one for part of my presentation. But recently we had a consultant go into a group that has a new office building of 15 workers, and what he wanted to sell them was this massive server. And when I questioned why the massive server, they're just going to do email and file sharing, he said, because we're going to put 6 Windows servers on it with virtualization, and that will save them money. And I just felt like, where do these people come from? Because our solution was put a fiber link between the 2 buildings, because the 2 buildings were only a few meters apart. They had a Linux server in their main building that had been providing email and all sorts of services for 50 of their staff for 8 years. Where does this guy come along and say, put in this $20,000 server so that we can virtualize 6 other servers? I mean, can you imagine the total cost of ownership on that? And this isn't about totally cost. There's bigger issues than cost, but cost is a benefit. Okay. No others? Oh, yes, go for it.
You talked about the fact that using open technology meant that you could take a project you've done for one year and use that for another, or make that available to organizations.
Did I say that? We do it, yeah. I didn't listen to what I said, sorry. Yeah, okay.
I'm just interested in what the mechanism is that you've built into your organization to be able to, I guess, transport those projects to systems and make them available to others.
It just happens naturally. You know, you don't really have to put anything in place. I mean, it's a natural part of the development process that you would share this between people. One of the nice things about open source and what we've done for the community sector is we've prevented them from reinventing the wheel. See, one of the things that happens with your tax money, which is quite unfortunate, especially unfortunate for the person living on the street who needs the services, is that each group will go out and like hire a webmaster or hire this consultant who told them to buy this server, okay? And so it's not cost effective because they all have the same issues. So what they did through CASE was, by the way, CASE is a cooperative, so we're owned by those members. Okay, so they came together and said, this is silly the way we're doing this. We need a centralized place where we can get unbiased information. One of the big roles of CASE is advocacy. Okay? And so, look, if we thought closed source or something would work better for somebody, we'll do that. We're not about competing with commercial companies. We have things like cabling licenses, and we do cabling. But I won't do cabling in a big office where a commercial service can provide better service. We're not about competing. We're about filling gaps and finding better ways of doing things that don't exist. Okay, the community sector market is not a particularly attractive market for the commercial sector because they don't have huge budgets. So when they do work for them, they have to up the price. That's just the commercial reality. You know, it's not cost effective to do something for a 10-user group when you can do it for a 10,000-user group and make a huge profit. So they have to up the price. So there's scale here. But with open technology and by sharing it, we can get this effectiveness and leverage whatever we do so that it goes many places. Does that answer your question? Good, because they want me to go.
Thank you very much. We don't want you to go.